You've reached Conversation with Mr. A. This is your host, Anthony Apostilla. Thank you for listening. Let's get right to the episode. Welcome to another edition of Conversations with Mr. A. This is your host, Anthony Abastella. Thank you for listening. For today, I have Brandt Sword, lives in South Carolina, a veteran. For starters, Brandt, thank you so much for being on this episode.
Hi there, Anthony. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you for your time. And so, with today, it's Veterans Day. And for starters, I just want to say thank you for your service. Uh, Brandt, what branch of the military were you in, and how long were you there?
Well, I was in the Navy, and I was able to get a scholarship to go to school. So I spent 4 years in school, and then 5 years while I was in the Navy in submarines.
Okay. Can you explain to our listeners, was it a hard process to get into the Navy initially from school?
Well, for the application into the Naval Academy, that was a very challenging process. I didn't realize this. I looked it up recently. There are 10% of all applicants who are accepted into the Naval Academy. So I I was, really trying to figure out what I was even going to do with my life. My brother introduced me to aviation. He had received a few lessons while we were growing up in Iowa, and I really kind of fell in love with aviation. So with that, that really kicked me into gear and gave me a purpose, kind of drive to be able to get into the Navy. So I studied really hard. I didn't get in the first time, and then it was after my first year of college. I went to Iowa State before I went to the Naval Academy. That I was even able to get into the Naval Academy. So yeah, it was a tricky process. And I even had to interact with, my state representatives, and they were. I would kind of bug my representatives, even in Washington D.C., trying to petition to go to the Naval Academy.
Was it a hard process though to get them to listen to kind of accept? I mean, were there a lot of challenges doing that?
Yeah, it was really challenging. I mean, in terms of um, the people who were there, they're very strict in the process of trying to get an applicant. So the people that I interacted with, they were very warm and receptive, but at the same time, they had a certain standard that they were looking for. So it was challenging to get through all of that. Even like medically being medically qualified, I I received word that my hearing was going to medically disqualify me from even being in the Navy. I was even able to write my congressman, and they were able to help me, get past that to be able to get in.
Now, joining the Navy, was this something that you had wanted to do growing up? Was that something that you were looking, like a childhood dream, or just growing up?
I Yeah, it was. I think it was just something that kind of really interested me. Like with me growing up, I think I really liked the idea of going into the service. Uh, and my father was in the Air Force, but I hadn't really even considered it too much until I kind of found aviation as a bit of an outlet for me to be able to really, grow and maybe even turn that into a career.
Okay. So when you were in the Navy, uh, could you tell our listeners? I kind of gave a little bit of a little bit of a spiel early, but um, what exactly did you do in the Navy? Can you kind of explain to our listeners like the positions, like those who may not be familiar with the military or the Navy? Can you explain like what you did in the
hmm
submarines and? So,
Yeah. So when I got into submarines, I was a division officer. So I got in as an ensign. So that's the lowest ranking officer that you can be when you get into the Navy. Everyone from every commissioning source, whether it's the Naval Academy or ROTC, they go into the Navy as a an ensign, uh, and then or into the Marine Corps as a second lieutenant, and then you start off with a small division. So a division is about 10 people that you lead, and I would just help out and verify kind of the proper operation of the equipment, the electronics equipment in the submarine, and would just make sure that the guys in the division were taken care of. And not only that, I would end up having to stand watch as well. Standing watch is an important component of being in the Navy. You end up standing watch, especially when you're underway, uh, a good portion of the time. You might be standing watch every 8 hours. Uh, you know, you might have 2 8-hour shifts a day. So it's a pretty substantial thing that you're doing while you're in the Navy.
I'm curious, how are things? I'm assuming when you joined the Navy, of course, you had to go through training and boot camp. Can you describe the experiences of how that was like for you?
Yeah, the boot camp at the Naval Academy, it's called Plebe Summer, and at the Naval Academy, it is 6 weeks long. You start with induction day, so they allow you to be sworn in. It's just like you would be sworn in any branch of the service, whether you're enlisted or officer, to swear to protect and defend the Constitution. And from there, the boot camp is very rigorous. You do calisthenics in the morning, you work out throughout the day, you learn the customs and the capabilities of the military, specifically the Navy, when you are going through plebe summer. And, uh, especially at the Naval Academy, they have you memorize a whole bunch of facts and figures and capabilities. I remember the the big things were weapons forward to aft on ships, and capabilities of aircraft, what they can shoot, and the bombs they can drop. So and then you also learn the customs and traditions of the Navy during boot camp.
What were for you? What were some of the challenges during boot camp? Like for you, like what were some of the hardest materials that you feel like was tough to learn?
I Well, during boot camp, you would end up having to recite information. Like every day you had to know the menus for each one of the meals, and uh, they would call those are called rates. And right before a meal, a plebe would have to shout out, at the top of their lungs, the menu for the day and the uniform for the day. I just completely trying to having to remember the menus for the day, and then the upperclassmen would ask you the information of the arsenal of the Navy, and then they would even ask you news stories for the day. All of those things combined made it for a really challenging just compilation of things to remember throughout the day. And, you'd have to intelligently be able to recite all of that information.
It sounds like details was very important, remembering the details and being accurate. Am I right on that?
Oh yeah, yeah. The details are so important in the Navy. Like uh, you can never say that you're not important when you're in the Navy, just because every single job, whether it's from a seaman level up to an admiral in the Navy, if they aren't really paying attention and they're not focused on what they're doing, you can cause very bad things to happen. Uh, and like it's a pretty awe-inspiring thing when like if you're flying an airplane to drop bombs on target, you want to make sure you know exactly what you're doing there, so that you do it right.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
For yourself, while you were in the Navy, for you, what were some of your personal rewards and some of your personal challenges that you faced while being in the Navy?
I would say the rewards were really just the fact that I knew that I was one of those people who would kind of, in a sense, stand in the gap for this country. I've heard people say that they want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And I think the component of that being, the Navy or the military in general being bigger than yourself is, you know, um, we stand in for when these countries who don't know anything but you know, violence, and sometimes you have to, in order to be able to stop them, you have to stand up for the right thing, and you have to do it forcefully. So to be able to stand in the gap for our own country and our allies was a huge thing for me. I learned so many important ethics lessons while I was in there. I'm a very big the ends don't justify the means type of guy. And, how you do something is just as important as what you're doing. So you have to have the integrity to accomplish the mission. And in the military, the mission is always the highly important thing. So if you have, spiritual guidance, I'm so pleased to see that at the higher echelons of the Navy, and I've been very fortunate to see, you know, um, flag and general officers while I was in the Navy, and their level of ethics and their guidance and their reliance upon God was so high. So I was just very happy to see that that was the case. Um, and now the challenges, I would say in really in the Navy as well as pretty much any branch of the service, deployment is always the biggest challenge. Deployment, that's really when you are in a part of a unit. For me, it was a submarine. For me, I would go out to sea. I'd be out to sea for 3 months out at a time, and when I was out to sea, there was really no personal space whatsoever. I would sleep at right next to the missiles in the submarine, and if I wanted to work out, I was working out, front and center with everyone just walking by. So it you really had to rely on those people to trust them, and then uh, you know have grace, because you're kind of just in there with a whole bunch of other people, um, and having to, just have those everyday living situations where you might have just be kind of crammed in together. Uh, and when I was out to sea, my wife Ruth, she said it was almost like I was dead for 3 months because she would hear very little from me, and I would just sort of be resurrected, when the submarine would surface, and I'd be able to call her, and I would just show up again when the submarine docked.
That had to be really challenging to be away from family for the period of time, having limited to no contact at all with Ruth. I would imagine that had to be very tough on you. That had to be
Yeah.
testing your will.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, like when I was in submarines, I always heard people say, uh, in submarines, you'll either go down with the ship or you'll be unscathed, but you'll never have a Purple Heart. Well, in my scenario, in my situation, I got called up for an individual augmentation from the submarine to go over to Iraq. So I found myself in a war zone very quickly, and I had never even anticipated, being in submarines that would ever even happen to me. So yeah, there were a lot of close calls while I was over there. Uh, so yeah, that
And I
you're right.
understand. I understand that you did kind of get a Purple Heart. Now, can you, for our listeners, can you kind of explain a little bit what the Purple Heart is? And my understanding is you did get the Purple Heart recipient.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit?
So, the Purple Heart, it's a little bit more than just being injured in a battlefield scenario. In order to be awarded that, you have to be injured, and also it has to be an injury caused by the enemy. So, if you get injured, on your own equipment, you fall off of a truck, something like that, you won't get a Purple Heart, even if it's in a battlefield scenario. For me, there was a mortar round that came in, and it detonated very close to where I was sitting one day while I was having lunch. Uh, I I really felt like the hand of God was over me at that time. It was a funny scenario. I don't remember doing this, but while I was eating lunch, my friend said that I prayed for us, and I said, uh, God, give us protection over this place. And not 1 minute later, there was a mortar round that came in, and it was a partial detonation. So for me, I couldn't believe, I've never seen such prompt and pronounced response to prayer.
Wow, wow. I'm trying to visualize it. That had to be quite the
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, well, and my brother is an explosive ordnance guy, and he said, just based off where I was sitting, and how the detonation was, he said, "Man, Brant, you really, if that would have been a full detonation, there's no way you would have survived that." So, yeah, it was even though it was the green zone, it still felt pretty hot to me.
Wow, wow. That, whew. Um, One thing I was wondering, you talked about just a little bit ago, okay, the submarine, you were in close quarters with people, no personal space, a little bit of
Uh-huh.
boot camp. I'm wondering, how were the interactions like with the others? Because obviously, I'm assuming you had to build relationships, you had to connect with people. Those are the people you had to lean on. How was
Uh-huh.
those experiences like? Just building those relationships with your fellow crew.
Uh, I would say it was something that it was challenging, just because, like I said, we were in such close quarters, and it is, like you do have a hard time when you're, constantly right next to each other all the time. I learned, kind of the the importance of, kind of demanding, like from the enlisted guys, what they needed to do for their job, and then also trying to make sure to help them out with their own personal lives. Just because you, as a junior officer, you really are trying to be, you know, a bit of a boss, but also a mentor as well. So it was very important to be able to, just relax and have games with them. And then also, when you turn around to get the job done, then you'd be able to expect what they're capable of, and having them deliver that as well.
How were things like for you when you left the Navy? When you finished your service, was it hard? Because those are the people that you're with. You built those relationships with. Do you still keep in contact with them?
I I would say a lot of the people, like when I was in in school, a lot of those people I still maintain contact with. Yes, I it was it was a bit challenging for me. Like whenever you are in a battlefield situation, I would say that was the biggest part, getting out. The PTSD as a result of being over in Iraq was a challenging scenario for me. I remember even going to Disney World right afterward, and if you don't know, at Epcot, they have a fireworks display every single night, and it was a beautiful fireworks display, and I was kind of thinking, man, why am I not enjoying this at all? I feel like uh, I'm hearing all of those triggers to make me want to hit the deck and uh, run for cover type of scenarios. So, I was, as a result of the PTSD, I was frequently, kind of hyper vigilant, and it took me a few years to be able to decompress from that.
Kind of jumped ahead because yeah, that was my next question about PTSD. I mean, I hear about it. I've heard about it over the years, and you see it a little bit on TV, but that's Hollywood. But with the PTSD leaving, uh, it sounds like it's real. Not only is it real, but it really affects you.
Yeah, well, and I think everyone deals with it in their own way too. Some people, you know, uh, all of the triggers, there can be different triggers for different people. And every day you just learn how to deal with those triggers and you try to avoid whatever triggers you the most. Ironically for me, uh, there was always a hard time, in wide open spaces where you'd try to stay away from those spaces because of the IEDs potentially being detonated. Well, being back home in the United States, I love to go out in wide open spaces just because I feel so good about the safety and security that we have in the United States right now. So, uh, I feel like for the most part, we're able to walk around wherever we need to and be safe. Uh, Now, in terms of those things where I would be triggered to be really stressful, maybe angry, I I try to avoid, sometimes even just high stress type of situations. Sometimes it's a little unavoidable. You always have your job, and the job produces pretty high stress situations. That's how I ended up switching careers. I was in engineering before, and I got a nursing degree, and I'm a nurse now. So believe it or not, nursing is a stress reduction job for me. And that's actually helped out so much with my PTSD. I feel like it's one of those jobs where I'm able to help people out and get recognition for it and have time off to be able to decompress. All of those things that you would have a hard time doing, in the military. Uh, that it's not so much of an issue anymore.
I was gonna ask, wow, well, for to back up a little bit,
Uh-huh.
that's quite impressive to switch from engineering to medical to nursing. That's wow, that's
Uh,
impressive. That's impressive because I know those in medical field, it's tough for them, but that's quite impressive. I was gonna ask you,
yeah.
do you feel for veterans, uh, the mental health support is it's important for veterans, especially those coming in with major PTSD situations?
Yeah, I feel that it's so important. Uh, and I feel like there's so many veterans groups that help out. Like I'm even associated with the PGA Hope. There's a PGA Hope chapter here in the Somerville area, and they actually help people, veterans who have, military related injuries, neurological injuries. spinal cord injuries, and they actually help them so that they can play golf and use that as an avenue of decompression and camaraderie. It's a really amazing program out here, um, and they even have special carts so that the veterans who may have spinal cord injuries and might be partially paralyzed uh, can actually use this cart. It sits them up, and then they're able to rotate their shoulders. And if they're not able to use their legs, they're able to use this cart to help them out with those spinal cord injuries.
That's really remarkable. I was going to ask with you, um, do you know anyone that suffered, some major some physical injuries just from their time in the military and the Navy? Do you have contact with those who have suffered those type of injuries?
Uh, well, I didn't really know people personally who had suffered those types of injuries. It was really, when I was convalescing from my injury, I actually had a very bad infection in my hand as a result of, a piece of shrapnel being in there. Um, and I saw other people who had very bad, traumatic brain injuries and head trauma. Um, you know, so like for those types of injuries, um, I actually have a friend who he has a traumatic brain injury. It wasn't specifically the military, but he got the brain injury while skiing, um, while he was in the military, and he ends up having to have a wheelchair, a walker, uh, and he struggles with it every day. Just to recall information, to be a good father, um, type of scenario. So yeah, it's one of those things where he battles with it every single day, uh, and does a good job with it too. Uh, he he's really a solid guy.
It sounds like he has a really good attitude and positive perspective towards it.
Yeah, I would say, he has a Christian worldview and a wife with the same, and she is, kind of one of those saints who helps him out with it, everything, every day. And to be honest, I've actually seen such great things with the VA. Uh, the VA has helped me out immensely uh, in terms of getting through my PTSD, and then any other medical conditions that I've had. I've been able to rely on the VA for all that help. And I know my friend does the same thing as well. With his condition. Unfortunately, he had to be medically discharged from the Navy, and they've continued to help him out every step of the way.
That's wow. That's amazing. One thing I've noticed
Yeah,
throughout our conversation, and I've noticed you've talked a little bit about your faith, and how it's kind of helped you through. Can you explain to our listeners about how it's gotten you through? Because it sounds like it's been a big part of who you are.
yeah. Well, I think it was just one of those things where uh, every step of the way there were people there who uh, were Christians as well, and then even those people, it to me it didn't really matter if you were a Christian or not. Um, I felt like I was able to project. Hopefully, people would see this. I would want to try to project the light of Christ in any situation. So it was, even if people would say they weren't really, with a strong faith, you would get to witness to them, and they were really receptive to that. And then, in order to grow spiritually yourself, there were people along the way who were, um, either in higher ranking or lower ranking positions who were just amazing people of faith. It was really cool to be able to see all those spots, and it was so needed too. You know, like with that level of integrity that you need when you're in those hot, challenging situations in the military. You have to have something that's going to stabilize you and get you to be able to calm down and realize, you know, kind of the uh, maybe the overall mission of what you're trying to do.
I'm wondering, Brant, for the younger people, maybe for those who are wanting to join the Navy, those in their maybe they're coming out of high school or they're in their early 20s. What piece of advice can you give to those who want to join the Navy, the military, and they're young, they're fresh out of high school? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say that probably one of the best things you can possibly do is join the military, whether it's right out of high school or if you want to go to college. Uh, in terms of even if you want to learn a technical skill or you want to develop leadership abilities, um, really the military is a great way to do it. Um, I would say, you know, there are so many people who just really don't know what they're going to do with their lives. Uh, it's something that, you know, like I said, is above you, and it really forces you to focus and be a disciplined person. Um, that when you're at the end of it, you say, "Oh my goodness, I'm a completely different person." You know, like I feel like people say that I'm very organized and uh, that I like to have things a certain way, and I was never that way growing up. I was always very disorganized. So I kind of try to say that I'm a reformed type A personality. Uh,
Nice, nice.
even though I was never really a type A personality type. But you know, I just always had that ingrained in me, you know, to try to do the very best job that I possibly could every time, and you know, have a really good solution to a problem that you have.
Makes sense. Hey,
Yeah.
Brant. Now we're approaching the end of the interview, so I always like to
Uh huh.
close out my interview with it's a fun thing I do called word association. So I'll give you a word or two, and
Okay.
just some of the first things that come to mind. And this is just more of a lighthearted. Um,
Okay.
all the listeners know, longtime listeners know that for me, for example, one of the things that I really dislike is pickles. And so I guess
Uh
I'll start
huh.
with the first thing. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word pickles?
Oh man. Well, I have a good association with pickles. I always feel like, uh,
Bless your
whenever you
heart, man.
get,
Good.
whenever you get a sandwich from Firehouse Subs, you always get an extra pickle there. So I'm always trying to collect all the pickles from my kids
Oh,
because
no
I love
judgment
them.
from me. All right. All
Yeah,
right.
I guess you and I have to eat at Firehouse Subs sometime soon.
I might have to take out the pickles there. All right. All right. How about first thing that comes about when you hear rap music?
Rap music, uh, good grief. Uh, I guess I just think of Eminem.
Okay. All right. How about
And
country music? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, country music. Uh, well, I all I can think of with country music is uh, Johnny Cash and how much my friend. So when I was growing up, my friend Jack Hayes, he was my mentor. Uh, he always loved to listen to classic country music, and Johnny Cash was one of those people. So
Okay. All right.
he would
Okay.
always take me on business trips with him, and we'd be listening to music like that, Johnny Cash or Eric Clapton. He would, you know, I'd always
Classics.
hear him say, "Brand, go get the music."
The classics. How about this? How about horror movies, slasher movies, gore, the horror movies?
uh, oh geez, I would say Alfred Hitchcock and Psycho.
Classics.
So our kids, I need to let them watch Psycho at some point because there's so many people who make references to it, and they don't know. They don't know the movie.
How about romantic movies?
Uh, I guess would Gone with the Wind be a romantic movie?
It's a classic. It's a wonderful classic, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, okay, how about 70s disco music?
Uh, Naptown Funk. Love Naptown Funk.
It's classic. It's another classic.
Yeah.
How
Which
about video?
there was
Go ahead. Go ahead.
there was the Naval Academy remake to that song. You if you Google search Naptown Funk, it's Annapolis Town Funk. They use the music uh, melody and then they have like a midshipman theme to it. Really really good.
Nice. How about video games?
Uh, Super Mario Brothers. Everyone says
The
they always
original is the
sing the
classic. Yes. Classics. Classics.
yeah.
Oh, how about this one? Bad hygiene.
Uh, I think of British Smiles. When you see a Brit, some of the
Okay.
British smiles can be, uh, you know, like teeth coming out.
Oh my. No, man. How about sardines?
uh, Sardines. Uh, I would say I've had them in salad one time, not
Oh
again.
my. Oh man. Oh,
Yeah,
I can't imagine that.
and that
Oh,
was even at a high end restaurant. I figure if I've had a high end sardine and I still don't like it, it's hopeless.
I've never heard that combination before. Sardines are the salad. That's new for me. Okay.
I think
Oh,
it
go ahead.
sometimes in Caesar salads they'll put sardines in.
Oh, that's new for me.
Yeah.
Okay. How about last one? WWE or MMA?
Uh, whew, WWE.
Yeah.
Much
Yeah.
more entertaining.
Yeah. All right. So, in closing, is there anything that you would like to tell our listeners, like a final message or anything you'd like to say?
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me. I I I feel so honored that you would be wanting to interview me. Just remember, whoever you see today for Veterans Day, if you see a Vietnam veteran, if they have a hat on, Korean War, try to pull them aside and just say, "Hey, thank you so much for your service." It means so much to them.
Yes, and Brent, thank you for your service and thank you for sharing the stories and just sharing your experiences. It means a lot.
I really appreciate you having me, Anthony.
Okay. Thank you, Brent. Take care.
All right, you do the same.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Goodbye.
Bye. And that concludes this edition of Conversations with Mr. A with Brandt Sword. Thank you, Brandt, for a wonderful interview. Just so much insight, a lot of experiences, and most importantly, Brandt, thank you for your service and for serving our country. Just some remarkable stories. All I can say is Brandt is a great, great man. So thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. More to come.